Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was February 7th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico. And this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Moltcora Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Before we get started on today's document, I'd like you to just take a moment to ponder this question. If you were to become a medieval king, how many sapphires would you go out and purchase? Do you have a number of sapphires in mind? All right. Let's see if you are up to the challenge of being a medieval king with a shopping list. Let's begin today's document. If you guessed 5, you were right on the money. Joan, in today's document, acknowledges receipt of 5 sapphires in different arrangements in terms of how they're constructed as pieces of jewelry. If you put a gem on a scepter, is that a piece of jewelry? I think it is. Alright, but that's not all. There's a lot of stuff in today's document. On February 7th, Joan wrote a receipt acknowledgement for a rather long list of items. And it seems to me like he's feeling better. The person who wrote this document, I think, had a vigorous constitution. Because there's a lot of extra in this document. A lot of extra description of a lot of the products. And I think that this is not something the scribe would have just kind of provided for Joan. I think that Joan is really happy to have received a nice care package from Mallorca that has all these luxury items. And he's into it. I think he's into it. It's not some chancery scribe who's luxuriating in the descriptions of all these different items in this shipment. I think this is Joan. Okay, let's take a step back for a moment and describe a little bit about the sourcing information for this document. It starts out in kind of a typical way, where Joan is at the top of the letter En Joan per la gracia de Deu rey d'Arago. Alright, so he then, in the second line, identifies Berenguer Lobet as one of his procurators. Berenguer Lobet sticks around. Benjamin Gamble, in his book on the anti-Jewish riots of 1391, has a couple instances where he's identified Berenguer Lobet shelling out some money for different things. And so this particular person is somebody who is handing over the payment in order to obtain the products that then belong to Joan. And in this situation, Berenguer Lobet is identified as the procurator de les nostres rendes et drets del regne de Mallorca. So he's the procurator of our rents and rights of the kingdom of Mallorca. So that leads me to infer that the package its contents are about to be described originated from Mallorca, that the center of Mediterranean trade that is Mallorca is a place where you can gather a bunch of very valuable items, put them together in a shipment, and send them off to a brand new king who is not afraid to spend money. It's one of the things I like about Joan. He is not afraid to spend money. And I'm about to go into a whole big list of things that Joan spent his money on in these first couple weeks of being king. But I just want you to keep in mind that this is not all that extraordinary. I mean, I think Joan does take it to another level in a lot of ways, but spending money on luxuries, that's just part of what you do. It's part of the identity of being a monarch. It's just another way of legitimizing your political authority. And if you're like a miser and as king you don't want to spend money on luxuries, people might start talking. They might start saying, this person doesn't really seem to believe that they're a legitimate king because they're not, spending like one. And then, of course, you can go in the opposite direction and spend way too much, which a lot of people accuse Joan of doing, both in his time and later historians. So, I just want to say that Pere the Ceremonious, he was a big spender too. In a document that I became aware of because of the work of the historian Germán Navarro Espinach, Pere the Ceremonious bought some gold pillowcases for his bed. 5 gold pillowcases. I mean, they're like gold thread woven in with gold, so it's not like solid gold pillows. But anyway, I just mentioned that just to kind of say that as I'm going through this, it's gonna sound kind of funny and a little bit over the top. But just remember that that's what kings are supposed to do. And what I love about Joan is that this part of being a king, he's totally cool with. All the political stuff, he's like, no. But when it comes to spending money, yeah, he's in his comfort zone. So this document, it's about 35 lines. And it's just a big list of all the luxuries that were in this shipment from Mallorca. I'm pretty sure it's from Mallorca. It doesn't say that directly, but that's what it seems. Now, the part that's on the bottom of folio 15V, that's all cloth. Textiles were a really big deal. I mean, they are today. People like to engage in fashion, and people are always on the market for new textiles. These are textiles not just for clothing, but also, I think, for home decor purposes. So it's a little bit difficult for me to parse out what the different pieces of cloth are used for in this list. But the list is quite extensive, and it's clear that there's some silk going on here. So there's units also that are hard for me to understand. Like, for example, on line 11, there's 60 canes de drap de lin prim ampleur en quati pesas. So that I think there's some kind of division of units in here that I'm not quite understanding, but lin prim, I think that's like prime, the prime linen. Yes. Then after he's done talking about a bunch of different units of expensive cloth, prime comes up quite a lot. There's this item at the end of this folio. I'm pretty sure I understand it, but it's quite funny. There's some fans made of peacock feathers. Yeah, I mean, peacock feathers. They're big. They're good. Put on a fan. They'll keep you cool. So he's got a bunch of different linens, some silk. I think there's some brocaded silk in there. And then, some peacock feather fans. And by the way, Joan was a firm believer in the power of the peacock. He regularly ate peacock. Yeah, cooked it up and ate it. Peacocks were associated with divinity, and there's a lot of peacock iconography that goes way back into early Christianity. And the peacock's association with the divine is something that actually occurs quite a lot throughout the Middle Ages in all kinds of different contexts. And in the Crown of Aragon at this time, there was a real belief that if you ate peacock flesh, it would help extend your longevity. So it was one of Joan's favorite things to eat. And then we turn the page, and the list continues. We, I think, are finished with the cloth. The first line of Folio 16R has something about obra morisca. So Joan is excited to receive work, craftsmanship, artisanal work that is associated with Muslim artisans. I can't quite figure out exactly what this is. I don't know that it's a piece of cloth. It might be something else. But it does say obra morisca. And then as we get further down, we get to our first sapphire at the end of line 3. And basically lines 3 through 7, I think, are all sapphires. So there's 5 different sapphires. They're all described individually. And he also talks about how they're mounted on scepters. It seems the word is scepter. Got into a little dicey, spicy situation here with this word. So if you go to the Diccionario Català Valents Balear, then you'll see that if you type in the word verga, first definition is like a bar. Second definition is a scepter, like one of the sources in the Diccionario is from Pear's Ordinances again. Like he has a rule for what's supposed to be on the scepter, how you're supposed to hold your scepter. My gosh, that guy. And then the next definition, well, this is a podcast that is not really rated with a mature only rating, and so let's just say you can use your imagination. And the source for that is a 1375 source for that definition of the word verga. Joan repeats that word so many times in this section. I have a feeling he might have been giggling while doing this, because it's just a little much. This whole thing is just a little much. But anyway, he goes on about the sapphires and how they're decorated differently. And then after that, he lists some carpets. And there's different carpets of different colors. One of them is identified as an obra de barbaria. And that is 5 lines from the bottom. So some kind of pagan design. I'm not quite sure how to interpret obra de barbaria, other than to say that Joan would not have associated it with something Muslim. It could still have been something from the Islamic world, and Joan just didn't know that, but it, to his eyes, looks like it is a design that has come from a pagan source. So we've got a couple more words about the different carpets in here. I think there's maybe like 5 carpets. And the last one is described as having works of diverses colors. So easy to translate that. A carpet of many colors. So he's gone on and on. This is a long document with a lot of unnecessary detail. Like at one point he's talking about how one of the sapphires is on a scepter that has, I think, a rose designs on it, and then there's like a turquoise that's encased in some kind of other gold. I mean, it's just all very drawn out. Oh, there's emeralds in there too. He's got 2 emeralds. So it's just this long list of luxury items that he has received. And I feel like on February 7th, Joan really started to embrace that whole being a king thing. The other aspect to this is that if there's any of these items that are not for him, like if there's any of these items, whether it's the textiles or the jewels, it's not clear at all that they're intended for him to give to anybody else. It looks like this is just like a big bonanza for Joan himself. Although, I don't know, there's not exactly evidence to suggest that he wasn't going to be sharing any of this, or maybe giving one of these precious jewels to Violante, or maybe Violante got her own shipment from Mallorca. I don't know. But anyway, this has just been one of those moments where we see the luxury. The Crown of Aragon, remember, it's at its apex as a Mediterranean power, and its shipping is just, its merchants are everywhere in the Mediterranean. And here we see a very material culture set of items. An example of the material culture that comes from that Mediterranean-wide luxury. That's what I'm trying to say. So, the category of this document is robes y joyes, the clothes and the jewels. And that is identified at the very beginning of it, line 3. And this one was really fun. This is a really fun one to talk about. And I am hoping to get into more detail about what kinds of clothing Joan and Violante were wearing. I think that the fashion history of this time is super interesting. There's one moment in this document when one of the textiles is referred to as French. And I do have a theory that a lot of the ways that Violante and Joan dressed were recognizably French style. I still have to confirm that through more research, but that's one of my side projects for the year. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed this taste of luxury from a medieval king. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt cara companiona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I have done my job. Because remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes. and listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.